For the past 20 years, we've had a front row seat to God doing more than we could ever imagine. Lives impacted for all eternity. Public professions of faith through baptism. Kids and adults discipled in the ways of Jesus. Campuses expanded to reach the multitudes, serving the least, the last, and the lost. And now our sights are set on something bigger and bolder, something immeasurably more. Let us join God in what He is doing next.
Oh, well, good morning, Rolling Hills Church family. It's so great to be together today. Welcome right here at our Franklin campus. Welcome online campus. What a joy to worship our great God together. And welcome back to our series. We're in this great series called Next. And we've been in this series walking with this guy, Nehemiah. And Nehemiah lived back in the Old Testament times. And Nehemiah said, I'm going to take a next step for the glory of God. I'm going to step out. And that's what we've been challenging one another, right? Whether it's a big step or a small step, but how can we grow deeper in our walk with the Lord? How can we grow stronger? And Nehemiah, man, he was like living the dream, right? He was kind of the prime minister in the Persian Empire. And then he hears from his brothers that the walls of Jerusalem were broken down. And God broke his heart. And Nehemiah said, I've got to do something about it. So Nehemiah, we saw he prayed and then he planned. He said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And he went and talked to the king, Artaxerxes, and the king gave him his blessing to go back. And he went back, and we saw last week in chapter 3 that he rallied the people, and everybody started to rebuild the walls. I mean, Jerusalem was in disgrace. It was broken down, right? And together they started making this difference. But then they started working. We're going to come today to chapter 4, and then the opposition comes. Right? Then there's opposition. Everything was going great, in chapters 1, 2, and 3. And then we see opposition. And it's the same thing in life for all of us, right? Whenever we're living our lives, then all of a sudden there's this opposition. And maybe you had this great plan for your life. Maybe you had this great plan this morning, right? Get up and we're going to be so excited. It's going to be great at church. And then the bed monster's just kind of holding you back. You're like, oh, but it's raining outside. It's like all this, or then you start to can't find the kids' shoes. Where are the kids? Where are we? We're getting late. Let's go. And then all of a sudden, it's like the enemy comes in, and starts putting these thoughts in your mind and your heart, and then you're like, oh, it's football, and all these things are right there, and it's opposition. And you have this plan, to have a great marriage, and things are great on your honeymoon, and it's awesome. Then you get back, and then you find yourself living together, and you're like, whoa, wait, you take out the trash. No, you take out the trash. No, whoa, all of a sudden this opposition comes in, or, well, I want to raise this great family and have these great kids, and things are good, and then they get 3, right? And it's like, wow, wait a minute, you're not supposed to talk back, and it's all these things in our lives, and this opposition comes. And even for church, right? You're doing this great work, and I want to serve, and I want to be involved, and all this, and then you see the opposition. It was Mike Tyson who said, the famous heavyweight boxer, and he said this: everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And it's like, great, everybody's got this plan, how it's going to go, and things are going to work out. And then all of a sudden, life comes along and punches you in the mouth. And you're like, whoa, where did that come from? I didn't see that coming, right? I thought everything was going to be perfect and fine and all this. And then next thing you know, there's challenges. Next thing you know, there's struggles. Next thing you know, there's opposition. Well, how do you handle that? How do you handle it? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to see how Nehemiah did, and I pray God will speak to every one of us. I'm so glad that we can gather today. So if you have a Bible with you today, I invite you up with me in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 4. Nehemiah chapter 4. So Old Testament, kind of go back there, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job. You're right there, kind of the middle of the Old Testament there. And you're seeing this guy, he lived 2,400 years ago. And we saw in Nehemiah 1, he was the cupbearer to the king, this prime minister, this great job. He was in the palace in Susa. And he could have kicked back. He could have said, why do I care what's happening 800 miles away, right? I've got a cush job, a sweet deal. But God said, no, you get involved. You make a difference. You go and be a part of rebuilding. The walls had sat broken down for 70 years. Nobody did anything about it. And then Nehemiah comes along and rallies everybody, and they go, yes, let's do a great work for the glory of God. And if you missed last week, man, go back and listen, because what we talked about is it takes 100%. right? 100% participation, everybody being in it, everybody serving together, everybody making a difference. And for Jerusalem to the Jews, man, it's like the church is to Christians. And for us to build God's church in our day and our time. So look at chapter 4, what happens? It says, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, what are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? No, come on. Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are? So here's Sanballat. He's up in Samaria. Now the Samaritans hated the Jews, right? And Sanballat's like, whoa, what's going on down there in Jerusalem? We kind of liked it being broken down. We liked it being in disgrace. You know, he was benefiting probably economically because they couldn't fight back or have walls or anything. He was benefiting, right, being over here in control. And so he starts mocking them. What do those guys think they're doing? Come on. Well, Tobiah, the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, what are they even building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones. So Tobiah, the Ammonite, comes in and is like, come on, what are you guys doing? And this psychological warfare, right, starts. Taunting, ridicule. Maybe you've been there. People kind of come along, they question your character, like, oh, come on, what do you think you're doing? You're trying to live for the Lord, really? You remember what you did? Remember your past? I mean, come on, really? You think you make a difference? Or they come along and they say something about your work. Really? You think that's good? That's it? You know, and you go, oh, man, you just kind of get down, right? You turn in on yourself, but not Nehemiah. Look what he says in verse 4. Hear, O God. He begins to pray. Hear, O God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. So he prays, and then look at verse 6. So we rebuilt the wall. They didn't stop. Even though they have this opposition, even though there's persecution, right? So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart. They worked with all their heart. They were committed. They were into it. They were passionate about it. But the opposition didn't stop. When Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. Gosh, how relevant is this today? Right? I mean, here we are, 2,400 years earlier, and I mean, it's still happening today. Samaria in the north, the Ammonites over in the east. You've got the west, Ashdod, which is the Philistines, that whole area. Everybody coming against Jerusalem. Everybody coming against the Jews. And they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. Look at verse 9. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out. There is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. Also, our enemies said, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work. Whoa. Different level right there, right? Right before they know it. We're going to sneak in and we're going to kill them and put an end to the work. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times over. Persecution didn't stop. The opposition didn't stop. The struggles didn't stop. 10 times over. Wherever you turn, they will attack us. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families. That was so smart, Nehemiah, right? We're going to fight with families. We're going to be together. We're all in this. With their swords, their spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. He stood up, he looked it over. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. When our enemies heard that we were aware of the plot and that God had frustrated it, isn't that awesome? The enemies saw that God was with them and that God had frustrated it. We all returned to the wall, each to his own work. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears and shields, bows, and armor. The officers posted themselves behind the people of Judah who were building the wall. Those who carried the materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other. They got a sword in one hand and a shovel in the other, right? We're going to work, but we're also ready to fight if we have to. And each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Whenever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. And then look at this part. Our God will fight for us. I don't know if you underline your Bible, but man, underline that right there. I underline that, highlight it, hold it, whatever you do. Just put it away in your mind and your heart. So we continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn until the stars came out. At that time, I also said to the people, have every man and his helpers stay inside Jerusalem at night so that they can serve as our guards by night and the workers by day. And then look at verse 23. Neither I, nor my brothers, nor my men, nor the guards with me took off our clothes. Each had his weapon, even when he went for water. Wow. These guys are like, man, we're not even, taking off our clothes. We're in it. We're committed. We're dedicated. We're not going to stop. Let the opposition come, but we're going to stay strong and stand strong for the glory of our God. Wow. Guys, there's an incredible lesson here for all of us. And so I'd love for you to give, if you have a worship guide, to take that out. If you're online, you want to pull out the Rolling Hills app, there's a place to take some notes today. But don't miss this today. This is so important for all of us. Look at this one, first one. When you're doing God's work, you will face opposition. When you are doing God's work, you will face opposition. Look, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry, right? Angry at the work of God, and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews. See, Nehemiah faced opposition, and so will we. A lot of times we think when we accept Christ, right, it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns and cupcakes and flowers, right? We have this time, and it is, man. When you accept Christ and you're baptized, it is awesome. I mean, awesome, right? You come up out of that water, and then you just got this smile. You're just so happy because you're like, God's forgiven my sins. I didn't do anything. I didn't deserve it. God forgave me. Jesus died for me. I mean, there is this unbelievable joy, this peace, this purpose in your life. But at that moment, too, you enter into the battle. At that moment, too, right, you begin to understand that there's opposition out there. See, here's the thing. You could be in the center of God's will and still go through struggles. Don't miss that today. Because sometimes we go through a struggle and we think, well, God's abandoned me. God's left me, I mean, what happened? I messed up. I sinned. God's mad at me. No. We live in a broken world. We live in a fallen world. When God created this world, it was perfect. I mean, perfect, right? And then what happened? Man sinned. And so now all of a sudden you got sin, you got death, you got decay. Now one day it'll all be made right. One day in heaven, there's no more pain, there's no more suffering, there's no more death. But until that day, we live in a broken world. We live in a place where there's evil. We live in a place where hurt people hurt people. And it's hard. And it's challenging. And the struggles are real. But we're not immune, right? And we're not unique. People who've gone on before us have faced that opposition. I think about Job. Job, here's this guy. It says he was blameless in the sight of God. Job was blameless. I mean, he was in the center of God's will. He's doing everything right. He would even offer sacrifices for his kids going, well, my kids may have messed up and they may have done something wrong, so I'm going to offer sacrifices for them. I mean, this guy was generous and kind and amazing. And then one day, Satan goes to God and goes, well, you know why Job's like that? Because look you've blessed him. I mean, he's got all this money, success, and all these things. I mean, well, why not? I mean, the only reason he worships you is because of all the things you've done for him. And God's like, no, he loves me for me. Satan's like, no, he doesn't. And then all these things were taken away from Job. I mean, like literally raiders come in and they steal his livestock and the house blows down where his kids are, like all of his kids, I mean, like die. I mean, like it was just like everything. And even his wife comes to him and says, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? Thanks, honey. You know, like, but Job goes, you know what? The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's deep faith. So much so that he stayed faithful to God the rest of his life. And the rest of his life is actually the best part of his life. If you read on in Job, I mean, you see God just do incredible things, but he stayed true in the middle of it. Jesus said this. He told his disciples in John 16:33, he says, in this world you will have trouble. Not you might, not you could. No, you will have trouble. But take heart, exclamation point. I've overcome the world. Don't forget that our God is greater. See, use times of opposition to grow in your faith. Use times of opposition to grow in your faith. You know, we understand that physically, right? We understand when you work out, you get stronger, right? You don't just go to the gym and lay on the bench press and just do the bar, right? And do it 30 times and leave and go, okay, well, I got stronger today. No, you start adding weight, right? That's what those things are there for, right? You start adding the 25s and the 45s. Why? Because you get stronger. But the same thing is true spiritually. The same thing is true spiritually. When you go through those harder times and those challenging times, then you're getting stronger. You're knowing that God is with you, that God is for you. That's how James can write this. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Now, I don't know if we're all there yet, right? You know, like I don't know if I get joyful when I go through trials yet, right? But I pray that I can hold on to God in the middle of it. Why? Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. I bet some of the strongest people spiritually that you know have been through some of the most challenging times. And you talk to your grandparents or your great-grandparents, or you talk to people who've walked through some hard times and you just go, man, you're a rock. You're steadfast. I want faith like that. And they have this joy about them. They have this peace about them. They have this depth about them. And you're going, wow, I want that. I want that. Here's what I want you to see next. Look, opposition comes from the outside and the inside. Opposition comes from the outside and the inside. Don't miss this. Look, meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. Guys, there's two different ways that opposition comes, right? The outside, but there's also the inside. See, we're living in an increasingly hostile culture. We are. Our world is angry. You see the wars that are going on around. You see it and it just breaks your heart. You see what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, and then you see 8 days ago as Hamas comes in, just like right here, surprise attack of women and children being killed right there in Israel. I mean, it's heartbreaking when you watch this and you just see all that's happening. And you're thinking, what is going on? And people ask me, like, are we close to the end times? And I'm like, well, you know, we're closer than we've ever been, right? But you start looking at Hezbollah in the north, you got Hamas in the south, you've got Israel in the middle. I've been to Israel 8 or 9 times. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it is the Holy Land. You can feel God's presence there, but everybody's fighting for Jerusalem. I mean, Hamas, Hezbollah, right, Iran, everybody's coming in for Jerusalem. And that's where Armageddon's going to go down. I mean, you read Revelation, right? The Valley of Armageddon right there outside of Megiddo. I mean, there's been more bloodshed in that part of the world than any other place, right? Because it's a land bridge between Europe and Asia and Africa. Everything is going to go through there. And so we know, right? I mean, that's where Armageddon is going to happen in the end times. And you just look at this and then you think geopolitically, right? U.S. and Israel and Europe, and now you're seeing, you know, Iran, and you're seeing Russia and China. You know, you go, whoa.